21 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development. Pursuant to Standing Order 108, subsection 2, and the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, September 23, 2025, the committee is studying the operation of the Royal Canadian Navy in the Taiwan Strait. I would now like to welcome our witnesses for our meeting today from the Department of National Defense. Major General Travis Morahan, Director General, International Security Policy. From the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development, Eric Laporte, Executive Director, Regional Security and Defense Relations Division, and Ryan Barg, Executive Director, Greater China Political and Coordination Division. Up to 5 minutes will be given for opening remarks, after which we will proceed with rounds of questions from members. I now invite Major General Travis Morahan to make an opening statement of up to 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, honorable members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. The
Indo-Pacific region is at the epicenter of a generational global shift. Developments in this region will shape Canada's security, prosperity, values, and economic future for decades to come. A strong defense presence in the Indo-Pacific positions Canada as a reliable, long-term security partner and helps create the stable conditions, open sea lanes, predictable rules, and regional security that underpin shared prosperity. Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy advances our national interests by contributing to a more secure, prosperous, inclusive, and sustainable region while strengthening Canada's national and economic security at home.
I have a quick pause because one of the members, Mr. Abul Taif, is not receiving any audio. Yeah, okay.
Oh, English, 1, 2, 3. This is the English channel, 1, 2, 3. English channel, testing, 1, 2, 3, English channel.
This is the interpreter on the English channel. Can you hear me on the English channel? This is the interpreter speaking on the English channel.
Please continue.
The Indo-Pacific strategy advances our national interests by contributing to a more secure, prosperous, inclusive, and sustainable region while strengthening Canada's national and economic security at home. Through this strategy, Canada has increased its defense presence in the region, allowing for more engagement, cooperation, and collaboration with allies and partners.
Continue to rise. We remain committed to a sustained defense presence to ensure Canada remains reliable, credible, and trusted partner on regional defense and security on an enduring basis. Under Operation Horizon, we have increased Canadian Forces' participation in regional and multinational exercises and activities and tailored defense training to strengthen our collective resilience and interoperability. Through Operation Neon, Canada, alongside regional partners and allies, contributes to monitoring and upholding UN Security Council sanctions against North Korea. We deploy 3 Royal Canadian Navy ships to the Indo-Pacific annually, increasing opportunities to work with allies and partner nations and enhancing military cooperation, including port visits. nos navires de la Marine Royale Canadienne
Our Royal Canadian Navy ships conduct various activities such as multilateral maritime cooperation activities, as well as exercises with our partners in the region, such as the US, Australia, Japan, and the Philippines. During these deployments, the Royal Canadian Navy also conducts routine transits through the Taiwan Strait. The Taiwan Strait is indispensable to the security and prosperity of the international community. It is one of the busiest global shipping routes, carrying over 20% of global maritime trade each year. More than 1,000 commercial vessels cross the strait each week. It is therefore in the interest of all sides to maintain the peaceful and accessible nature of this waterway. From an operational perspective, sailing through the Taiwan Strait is almost always the most practical and efficient route for our ships to move between ports in the region.
in accordance with international law, including the United Nations Conventions on Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, and in waters beyond territorial seas where high seas navigation rights apply. Since 2018, well before the implementation of our Indo-Pacific strategy, we've conducted 13 Taiwan Strait transits, including under Operation Projection, the predecessor to the current Operation Horizon, as Canada regularized its presence in the Indo-Pacific. Since the launch of the IPS in November 2022, we have conducted 7 such transits, with the most recent one occurring in September 2025, accompanied with a ship from the Royal Australian Navy. These activities reaffirm Canada's commitment to peace and stability, to upholding international law, including UNCLOS, and deposing unilateral actions that threaten the status quo across the Taiwan Strait alongside our allies and partners. Additionally, they offer significant opportunities to build trust, advance defense initiatives, and deliver tangible results with key regional partners. Canada's approach is aligned with our closest partners and allies. The navies of Australia, France, Japan, New Zealand, the UK, and the US also transit the Strait. We continue to conduct these transits in full accordance with Canada's One China policy. As an active defense and security partner in the Indo-Pacific, our key focus will remain the delivery of such meaningful defense contributions on an enduring basis. Merci. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your remarks. I will now open the floor for questions, beginning with Member of Parliament Michael Chong. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for appearing today. I've a couple of quick questions to start. When the U.S. Navy transits through the Taiwan Strait, they call that operation a freedom of navigation operation. Does the Government of Canada use similar nomenclature? And if yes or no, why yes or why?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. You're correct. The member is correct in highlighting that the U.S. Navy uses the terminology FONOPS, Freedom of Navigation Operations, for some of its operations in the Indo-Pacific and elsewhere in the world. Those are based on sort of challenging baselines, challenging territorial claims, but also prior notifications. The Canadian Navy, its operations are, as General Moorhan mentioned, always under international law and UNCLOS. We do not conduct FONOPS per se. We conduct the only instance where we will push back on instances of another country is on sort of the prior notification for transits, but we do not conduct FONOPS as in the case of the U.S. Navy.
Okay. Thank you for that answer. When the Canadian Navy frigate HMCS Ottawa transited through the Taiwan Strait, Taiwan's foreign ministry welcomed the transit and indicated that it was a demonstration of Canada's firm position on the Taiwan Strait is international waters, while at the same time the People's Liberation Army released a statement accusing Canada of undermining peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. My question is, when Canadian naval vessels have transited through the Taiwan Strait, have they ever been met with activity from vessels that would be considered dangerous or unsafe?
Thank you, Chair, for the question. Of the 13 transits, we have had no unprofessional or unsafe interactions with elements of the Taiwanese Navy or the PLA Navy.
That's helpful. Thank you for that answer. The other question I have is, you mentioned in your opening remarks that Canada has increased its defense presence in the Indo-Pacific region. You mentioned as well that 3 Royal Canadian Navy ships are sent to the Indo-Pacific region annually. So can you tell us exactly how we have increased our defense presence? Like, have we gone from 1 Navy frigate to 3 frigates a year? Like, what exactly have we done to increase our military presence in the Indo-Pacific region?
Thank you, Chair, for the question. We've gone to a more regularized 3 Canadian warships in the Indo-Pacific region as a means to demonstrate Canada as a reliable and stable partner in the region. We have Euro-Atlantic interests, we have Arctic interests, we also have Indo-Pacific interests. Those transits, or those ships, are a demonstration of Canada's resolve in the region. We also have other activities, maritime or multinational maritime cooperation activities that we conduct with other navies. We also have Indigenous maritime training activities with our allies. We also have cooperation and training activities with other nations. I can get into a lot of detail if you wish, Chair. But it's through the conglomeration of these activities, senior leaders' engagements, port visits, that allow defense diplomacy to take place. So it's just not the ships. There's air activities, there's ground activities through additional exercises.
Okay, thank you. When we transit through straits like the Taiwan Strait, is the government of the PRC notified in advance of the transit? Or is this considered international waters such that no notification is necessary?
So, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. In accordance with our interpretation of UNCLOS and international law, we don't provide future notification, and also for reasons of operational security, because we deem these to be international waters, so we don't advise ahead of time for our transits.
The Indo-Pacific strategy identifies the PRC as I believe the terminology is a disruptive power in the Indo-Pacific region. Can you tell us what sort of disruptions you're seeing from a defense point of view from the PRC in the region?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. The PLA, the People's Liberation Army, has sought to modernize its capabilities and improve its proficiencies across all warfare domains to become a joint force capable of the full spectrum of operations through air, maritime, nuclear space, counterspace, electronic warfare, and cyberspace operations. We believe they have set a modernization milestone for the PLA military to be ready for any actions required or demanded by that government. All open source indications show a positive trend to be able to achieve this goal.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I don't have any further questions right now.
Thank you very much. We next go to MP Rob Oliphant. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Chong. Those are good questions that got me thinking, too, so it was helpful as well as the answers. Starting and leading off from some of his questions, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and the advancement of peace and security through a variety of ways is sometimes perceived differently by different partners. I believe strongly that the CAF, the Department of National Defense, CAF and Global Affairs, are genuinely concerned about peace and maintaining stability to ensure transit, to ensure trade, to ensure all of those things, as well as keeping the status quo. That's not always perceived that way by everyone. And I'm just wanting to talk about that difference of perception that the People's Republic of China has with respect to our engagement, either in the South China Sea or transiting through the Taiwan Strait, and our goals. And are there things from the foreign policy standpoint that we can do to show that what we are doing is indeed absolutely within the One China policy and promoting peace and stability in the region? I know I follow up on that because Mr. Chung was asking, what do we give advance notice? And because we deem them to be international waters, we take the route you said. But what can we do to ensure that this is seen as a positive enhancement for our bilateral relationship with China, as well as peace and stability in the region? Long question, but you can riff off it how you want.
Yeah, maybe I can start, and I'll let my colleagues jump in. Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. There are, as was highlighted, a lot of activities that D&D, CAF are doing in the region. A lot of it is defense diplomacy. A lot of it is exercise training, cooperation with partners, with allies. And then there are a number of other things that are not so much in the military sphere, but things like cooperating with partners on things like dark vessel detection program. All of that is intended to help build maritime awareness, domain awareness, picture, and understanding, and that is also helpful for all countries to understand what movements are happening, what things are happening. So while we don't give advance notification to China for transiting the Taiwan Strait, because that's again under UNCLOS, that is not required, not a requirement for us. The fact that when our ships are transiting, they will be followed. When our ships are doing activities or aircraft, they will be followed. There are at least the interaction of being able to sort of see each other in action, and then also then have lines of communications that are then allowed to grow and to be able to explain each other's positions. And certainly when we do transits, and General Moorhan is often on the receiving end of this, the Chinese embassy here, for example, will demarche us, or will be demarching our embassy in Beijing. So at least we can talk and have those frank discussions, which it allows us to explain our position, allows them to explain our position, but allows the exchange of information.
So maybe just to follow up, Mr. Chair, is that I would describe our defense military-to-military relations with China as positive but limited. And so the first engagement, recent engagement, was with the Commander of the Royal Canadian Navy in the spring of 2024. He went to a Western Pacific Naval Symposium multinational fora in China, where he met with his counterpart. Since then, the minister met at the Shangri-La Dialogue in the May afterwards. And my predecessor and myself have gone to China to the Shangsheng Forum in September, where we've met with our colleagues from the Office of International Military Cooperation at the Major General rank, and so that we can have dialogues to understand where we have frictions, how we communicate displeasure with each other's actions. In my interactions with the Office of International Military Cooperation, plus the defense attaches here, they've always been courteous and respectful interactions, and they allow us to have those frank discussions where they can express their displeasure as we can express our displeasure with their actions.
I will regret asking this question, but in terms of defense procurement, in terms of what you need to do your work, we're not the Defense Committee, Foreign Affairs Committee. Is there a message you want to give us as parliamentarians with respect to your capacity, your capability to do this, to engage peacefully? This is our goal as in Foreign Affairs, is to make sure we have peace in our world. Are there things that would be helpful for you to be procuring now that you think we should be doing?
I'll defer that language overall to my minister, but certainly the acquisition of the 12 submarines and the 15 river-class destroyers go a long way to be able to extend our influence in the maritime domain, not only in the Indo-Pacific, but also in the Euro-Atlantic and in our north.
Something I need to explain to my constituents, that we procure for our military to ensure peace. So I think that's... They don't always get it.
I would suggest that all of us in uniform want peace. It's the last thing that we want to be able to do.
Thank you very much. We next go to MP Duceppe. You have 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci aux témoins d'être avec nous aujourd'hui. C'est vraiment...
Thank you to our witnesses for being here today. It's a very interesting topic and very relevant remarks. I'd like to know if the minister has analyzed the risks of regional escalation following the transit from the Canadian ship in the Taiwan Strait.
Mr. Chair, il faut que mon réponse est un peu nuancée.
My apologies, I would like to continue in English.
So the way we approve these operations is the Maritime Component Commander represents to Lieutenant General Steve Boivin, who's commander of our Joint Operations Command. That is done in conjunction with allies. That concept of operations is brought to the Chief of Defense Staff and the Deputy Minister for approval and recommendation to the Minister based on the inherent risks that are involved in that. And there's a delegated authority matrix based on the risk. But certainly in all the concept of operations that I've seen, we go through a process of identifying the risk, what is the actual risk, assessing it, how bad is it, probability versus severity. We then go through mitigating actions. How do we reduce that risk? And then we assess what is the resulting risk. And then we compare that against the authority matrix for who can approve at what risk level. If it's acceptable level of safety, then that's delegated lower. And the higher risk operations have a higher level of authority. But I want to, reassure the chair and the committee that this is looked at in great deal for every deployment that we undertake.
Si je peux ajouter, Monsieur le Président, ce que le général a dit absolument.
What the general said is completely accurate. There is also interdepartment consultation in all cases in order to ensure that what has been proposed maintains the risk level. Your two departments that are involved, there aren't other departments. It's really foreign affairs and defense, mostly those two. In some circumstances, there are others. So. General, you spoke of the concept of the operation. Is there the objective of this operation? And in this current case, what was the main goal of that operation to send a Canadian ship in the Taiwan Strait?
The deployments start in Halifax and they end up in Esquimalt, and so they travel around the world through conducting various operations. So it's not, we never just send one warship to sail through the Taiwan Straits. And so just to reaffirm the exercises that we partake the multinational, multilateral cooperation activities with New Zealand, Australia, Philippines are in the south. And then we're going to transit through the Taiwan Strait to be able to conduct a similar exercise with Japan and South Korea. And so that is the most direct route to be able to go through there. It's about 200 nautical miles, 13-hour transit. And we don't conduct any other provocative activities while we're on that transit. Although we could fly helicopters, we could do boat drills. We just sail at an economic speed through the Taiwan Straits so that we can get to the next operating area.
Il y a quand même des réactions à chaque fois provenant du...
There have been certain reactions from the Chinese Communist Party. How do you respond to the Chinese Communist Party's reactions when they've been publicly published? Thank you for the question, Chair. Yes, when we do a transit, we certainly look at what will be said by the Chinese Foreign Affairs and Defense Ministers. We also look into the actions that they will take during the transit by the Chinese Navy, if the Chinese Navy will decide to shadow the Canadian Navy. Also, there are often instances where either the Chinese military attaché or Chinese diplomats in Ottawa will démarche, that is, contact their Canadian counterparts based in Beijing and call on them to explain themselves to the Chinese Minister of Defense. In that case, we explain our decisions, they explain theirs. It's quite frank. That doesn't mean that we will change our point of view, but we explain ourselves and we communicate.
Et là,
You have the right to respond or not, but there was a purge recently in the military commission that is by Xi Jinping. So, a very important person who's done that. All that to say, out of the 6 or 7 people who were in power, there are only a few people left. What's your point of view on that purge? And if there were to be another Canadian operation in the Taiwan Strait, and on that commission there were to be new people on that commission, do you think there would be a stronger reaction? Please speak to that, and what long-term consequences do you think there would be?
We're running out of time.
Je pense que c'est encore un peu tôt à voir c'est quoi les implications.
I think it's still a bit early to see what implications there would be. There's certainly a question of corruption in the Canadian military system. That's nothing new. President Xi Jinping being in charge is also not new. We're still early on in our analysis.
Thank you very much. Go to MP Abu Taif, starting the second round. Is your headset okay now?
That's still the same, but hopefully you can hear me. Thanks for appearing before committee. How often Canadian warships transit through Taiwan Strait?
Through the Indo-Pacific strategy, we've regularized the Canadian warship presence 3 times through the year, maybe off a little bit depending on the actual calendar date. But depending on where our operations fall, if we were just going to maintain operations in the south or just in the north, then that wouldn't require a transit. But as we do have Royal Canadian Navy ships sailing literally halfway around the world to try and maximize the training opportunities we have with our Indo-Pacific partners, Japan, South Korea, Philippines, Australia, New Zealand, I would suggest that because of the transit between those operational areas, that if required, there will nearly always be a transit through the Taiwan Straits.
After each passage, we hear condemnation from PLA. How you've probably been following their tone throughout the years. Do you see any change in their tone from the last time we crossed compared to the ones before?
Mr. Chair, thank you. The demarches that I've received since being in this job since August have been consistent. And once again, they state their position, the defense attaché to me here, representing their concerns. And my response is, as my testimony is before you today, that we conduct transits in accordance with international law and understanding of the United Nations Convention Law of the Seas.
Our passage or our movement there, along our allies, is to somehow stand for democratic principles. At least that's what we believe what we're doing. Is there any other interest you believe, a strategic interest for us going through the Taiwan Strait?
I'll speak for the military before passing over to my global affairs colleagues, Mr. Chair. Our presence in the Indo-Pacific region is meant to demonstrate Canada as a reliable and enduring partner in the region. And we believe our defense activities there are one of the strongest expressions to our partners and allies in the region that we are there. And it is able to open up other defense cooperation agreements and with other countries that allow us to advance Canada's interest.
I have a question, each one of you, if you feel to answer it. Prime Minister recently visited China. That relationship with China could affect us either way. Could affect us with Taiwan in a positive or a negative way. How do you read that? Do you see a change of attitude of the Chinese government toward our passage through the strait? Or do you see a change in relationship with Taiwan too? So I would like to see that from both perspectives.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for the question, Mr. Chair. Maybe it's too early to say. The visit just happened very recently. I think, all indications point to, a willingness or a desire on the part of the Chinese to re-engage with us. They're sending very positive signals. They're happy that that we seem to be moving forward with a pragmatic approach to cooperation with China. So I've noticed in my démarches a shift in tone. But specifically related to the Strait, the transits, I mean, we haven't done them since that visit, so I couldn't really speak to that yet.
Of course, would you like to weigh on the same question?
I think Ryan has answered it perfectly fine. Thank you.
Let's talk about the Chinese interest. I mean, we sail through international waters, so really we're not going through any other waters that belong to any country in the Pacific, China. What do you see in China's interest in this thing? Like when they complain about our passage that we're going through, what do you see? How do you read this politically?
Did you want me to take that? So thanks again for the question. So, Mr. Chair, I mean, China's interest in this is the, I guess, fundamental position on Taiwan. So since the beginning or the establishment of our diplomatic relations in 1970, via joint communique, that's when we established our One China policy, right? And I think that's the important piece here. It's very similar to, I'd say, the majority of countries around the world in terms of how they approach and engage with China. But basically, our One China policy, it has recognized the PRC as the sole legitimate government of China. Noting, and this is the important part, but not endorsing or challenging the Chinese government position on Taiwan. So the Chinese government has a very clear position on Taiwan. We note it, as do a lot, I'd say most countries in the world, but we haven't agreed to it. And I guess I'd classify that as we call it strategic ambiguity. And what it has allowed us is to maintain official relations with China, but at the same time have unofficial relations with Taiwan. And our relations with Taiwan are deep across many areas, and it allows us to basically agree to disagree. So the cases of the Strait transits are another example of that. We'll disagree with positions. The Major and colleagues here have talked about, our view in terms of international waterways. The Chinese position is different, so they will démarche us. They'll give their position, we'll give our position, and we'll move on. I think the most important thing to the Chinese now is that they understand that we'll agree to disagree. They just want us to reaffirm our commitment to our One China policy, and we do that. We've been doing that since 1970, reaffirming our position, and then we move on, and we're able to have relations with China, and we're able to have unofficial relations with Taiwan.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We go next to Monsieur Guilbeault. You have 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup. Merci, messieurs, d'être ici. Avant de commencer.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Before I begin, I would like to highlight Mr. Chong's statement today. I think all MPs on this side of the aisle agree with you. The safety of our citizens and MPs is an essential question for the whole government. I have a question that might seem a bit philosophical to start off, but that has very concrete implications. Regarding diplomacy, there are different schools of thought. There are those who think that you need to get involved with governments less that are very different from us. On the other end of the spectrum, there are those who say no. On the contrary, we have to engage with them. Here are a few examples that I've experienced. COP15 in Canada was at the United Nations. We did that hand in hand with China. At the time, we had nearly no diplomatic relations with China, but we managed to have an internationally recognized agreement, and it was considered a historic win. In your opinion, and you spoke to this a bit already, we can sit down with them and disagree on certain subjects, but we can also work with governments like that on subjects where we can find a middle ground. Please speak to that.
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair, for the question. Excellent question. In effect, as you said, it's a bit philosophical, but it's based on concrete examples. For example, there are efforts to speak with some countries such as Russia. With the war in Ukraine, our efforts did not work. There are other examples where it works and there's a transition. If we consider the government's action since last year, there was a desire regarding China to recognize that we had a difficult relationship regarding the two Michaels. And it made life hard. It made it hard to have discussions and a relationship with China. The same thing happened with another country. And so the government decides when it's in our interest, when there are subjects where we can cooperate, and when we can, we do cooperate. However, there are also subjects that will remain topics where we will disagree. And that's the case with China. I don't have an exact response, but I think we're in a world where we have to try to speak to all stakeholders and see where we can work together and be clear when there are limits.
Merci.
Thank you. There are things we do that aren't very well known. For instance, there's an environmental cooperation committee with China. There, Canada and China come up with public policy in order to protect the environment. Historically, over the last 30 years, China put those into place on the climate question, biodiversity. And that kind of cooperation over the last 30 years has continued. I think it's one example among others that shows despite our differences, there are subjects where we're all in the same boat, and we won't solve the climate crisis without speaking to China. The same goes for biodiversity. The two countries are co-chairing a committee that aim to put COP15's agreements into place. So there are subjects that will be difficult, and I've participated in meetings. For instance, in 2022, I told my Chinese counterparts that we were very worried about the rise of tension in the Taiwan Strait, and as you have mentioned, we agreed on the fact that we didn't agree. But that at least allowed us to speak together, even if we didn't agree.
Very short response, if necessary.
I can respond briefly. No, thank you. I know the honourable member has great experience on some of those files that he spoke about, and I also believe that that's a great example of where we were able to work with China even at when we disagreed on a whole lot of things. We'll continue to disagree on many areas, but having the lines of communication open has been a clear priority as we move forward. And just to give a couple examples, in December we held consular consultations. Those haven't happened in the past, I believe, 8 years. So if we want to protect our citizens, if we want to have those discussions even on areas that we disagree with, it's important that we have the tables to get together with the Chinese and talk through these things. And we do see some progress. Sometimes we will continue to agree to disagree, but having those channels of communication allows us a means to raise our concerns, understand each other's positions better, and hopefully find some common ground out of it.
Thank you very much, Monsieur Duceppe. Vous avez 2 minutes et demi.
Mr. Duceppe, 2.5 minutes. If you could give me 20 seconds more, because Stephen talked about Mr. Chong's statement. I'd also like to say that we support Mr. Chong's statement, and I'm also targeted by the sanctions because I'm also part of the committee. I think we all agree regarding Michael Chong's statement. Thank you. I'd like to know this. The government has committed to planning other operations. Is that the case? And will the Canadian Army go to the Taiwan Strait again?
Mr. Chair, so as a continuance with our Indo-Pacific strategy, the Royal Canadian Navy will continue to exercise through collateral or collaboration representing Canada's desire for a peaceful and stable region. The other activities that we do in the region, a recent exercise that I'd like to highlight was with Australia, Exercise Talisman Sabre, where we had our largest participation of Canadian forces under Op Horizon, which was 600 CAF members through all domains. And so we will continue to operate through the Indo-Pacific strategy. And as mentioned before, if we need to transit between operation areas in the north and south, we will likely continue to use the Taiwan Straits as the venue.
Monsieur Guilbeault disait qu'on pouvait.
Mr. Guilbeault said that we could have discussions on topics we don't agree with. However, should we not have discussions that might make the Chinese Communist Party irritated by our actions? For instance, the Taiwan's ambassador's visit here, or yesterday or the day before, who denounced the fact that Canada had done a certain action regarding Taiwan, or had almost signed an agreement with China. If we want to continue to support Taiwan and Taiwan's autonomy, if an agreement was already ready, are we preventing ourselves from signing an agreement with Taiwan in order to not make China mad? Thank you, Chair. I'll allow my counterpart, Ryan, to speak to this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I think it will always be a balancing act, and I think the most important thing is that we'll have to move forward with, Canadian interests, national and economic interests at heart. As I mentioned earlier, we have deep ties with Taiwan. The core of those ties are economic, people-to-people ties, and I believe that will continue. China, given that, as I mentioned earlier as well, that we will agree to disagree on the situation of Taiwan, China will push back on any and all engagement with Taiwan at all levels of provincial, municipal governments, at the federal levels, whether it's, collaborating on, virtually any areas, because that's their position, and it's always been like
Pourquoi
that.
cette entente-là n'est pas signée alors que...
Why haven't we signed that agreement when everything was ready? Even the legal side had been checked out. All that was missing was a signature. Then Carney came into power, and all of a sudden we didn't talk about that anymore while everything was ready to go.
With Taiwan continues on the economic files, and I know that there was an arrangement. I'll clarify as well that it's not a free trade agreement. We have unofficial ties with Taiwan. So the trade, what's called the Trade Cooperation Framework Arrangement, it's a non-binding arrangement to begin with. It's not an official free trade agreement, and it sets out broad trade and economic principles to facilitate this trade policy engagement with Taiwan. So my understanding is that that essentially, yes, this arrangement has been essentially agreed, and discussions are underway considering next steps.
We next go to MP Rood. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you all today for being here on this very, very important topic. To global affairs, I'm wondering if the Prime Minister's decision to stall or ignore a Taiwan trade agreement has been influenced by concerns about retaliation from Beijing, including risks to Canada's naval transits and operational posture in the Taiwan Strait.
So, Mr. Chair, thanks for the question. I can't really speculate in terms of, exact considerations taking place at the ministerial or prime ministerial level. I think that the PM has been very clear in terms of our desire to diversify our markets, and I think Taiwan is an important economic market for us, and that's why we were engaged in terms of seeking this framework arrangement with Taiwan. But we collaborate with them. We have an S&T agreement with them. We have, agreements around or arrangements around foreign investment, etc. I think that discussions are taking place, but I can't really speculate in terms of timeline on that or when that will come through. Obviously, the PM has been very focused on some very big challenges in our relationship with China. That was clear with his visit to China and what he was able to accomplish out of that. As that part of the considerations, I can't really speak to that.
Has the department provided a formal risk assessment, and would the department recommend moving forward with the Taiwan agreement?
So I think that would fall in the area of advice to ministers. So I don't think I'm able to speak to that.
Thank you for your answer. In your department's official threat and stability assessments, is Taiwan regarded as a more stable, rules-based, democratic, and reliable partner for trade and regional security cooperation than the People's Republic of China?
So thanks for the question, Mr. Chair. I think that we've been clear that Taiwan has been Taiwan is a vibrant democracy, and I think it would be fair to say that we see probably eye to eye with them on a lot more issues than others perhaps. So it's been a very strong economic partner with us, with whom we have unofficial ties, and I think it will continue to be so.
Why is the government hesitating to deepen economic ties with Taiwan while still expecting the Navy to keep defending freedom of navigation in the same region?
Well, I think that we can do I think we can do two things at once. As I mentioned, we can have, and we always have since 1970 when we established diplomatic relations with the People's Republic of China, diplomatic relations with China and unofficial relations with Taiwan. And so I think that we can continue to do so.
If the government agrees that Beijing's escalating posture raises the risk of miscalculation, will it commit to a renewed Taiwan strategy that includes deeper coordination with democratic partners and clearer contingency planning for Canadians and Canadian businesses in the region?
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure I have the answer to that, to be honest. I can say that, we do cooperate with many of our like-mindeds on a variety of issues, including Taiwan. We share best practices. We discuss with them our respective approaches to Taiwan. We've been involved in projects such as the GCTF Global Cooperation Training Framework, where we support and work with Taiwan. I think that's what I could say to that.
Thank you very much. So China has escalated tensions with large-scale drills around Taiwan. Is Canada taking a clear position on peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait and condemning these intimidation efforts?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe I could take that one. Obviously, yes, we've seen sort of the large-scale drills by the Chinese Air Force and Navy around Taiwan, but also other exercises in other parts of the South China Sea. In those instances, we certainly call and condemn those actions. The point is we are calling for peace and stability and maintenance of the status quo and avoiding heightening tensions unnecessarily.
Thank you. When a Canadian warship transits the Taiwan Strait and Beijing reacts with predictable outrage, what specific rules of engagement, de-escalation protocols, and force protection measures are in place to keep Canadian sailors safe from reckless harassment by the People's Liberation Army?
Thank you, Chair, for the question. All Canadian Armed Forces members, even here in Canada, have the right to self-defense. And so as we execute all operations around the world, we develop the rules of engagement consistent with international law. The force protection measures are standard for any sailing configuration, and we've got great confidence in the captains of those ships to be able to de-escalate the situation as quickly as possible. But if called upon, then as we all are, we're prepared to defend ourselves, but we hope that'll never have to be the case. We're sailing international waters under international law in a non-provocative manner.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We next go to MP Mona Fortier. You have 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président, et merci.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here, witnesses. I'd like to look into how we work with our partners in the region, other countries that are in the region. You mentioned this a bit in your opening remarks. How do we collaborate with those other countries? And specifically in this case, how do we work with regional partners and with our allies? You mentioned the United States and others.
I'll present it purely as a military cooperation. And
Oui, ça
if
c'est parfait.
my colleagues
Yes, that's perfect.
Predominantly, we conduct multinational maritime cooperation activities. And through these activities, we conduct various elements of training, communications, officer of the watch, boat transfer exercises, cross-deck, moving cargo from one helicopter to, or from one ship to another via helicopter, basic air defense, basic anti-submarine warfare. And we all do this in a manner that's consistent with the international law and host nation consent if we're operating within territorial waters. And so this gives us the confidence to be able to work with partners in the region if elements were escalate, but it also gives really great training for our young sailors, aviators, and soldiers that have joined the Canadian Armed Forces for an incredible experience and to see different parts of the world. The Halifax and Esquimalt for continuous operations all the time I can imagine get quite boring. So these activities allow us to be able to share Canadian values through port visits when we support heads of mission. So there's a whole gambit of opportunities that we can conduct with the Royal Canadian Navy that satisfy all those diplomatic, defense, and communication concerns.
Voulez-vous rajouter quelque chose du côté des affaires?
Would you like to add anything? Yes, certainly. Thank you, Chair. In effect, what my colleague said is correct in terms of the operational and tactical sides. Those are advantages. And commitment with countries become military, strategic, and diplomatic commitments and interactions. And often the Navy has a higher presence, and that can help the relationships in other domains. For instance, you can move forward in defense operations with Japan, signing the TTA with South Korea on a security and defense agreement, and an agreement with the status of forces. Those are some examples. Those activities lead to results that have knock-on effects beyond military cooperation. From what you have observed, have you seen or been inspired by some exemplary practices used by some of our allies or partners that we ought to put in place or explore? If yes, which ones?
Mr. Chair, so I don't have concrete examples for you. I'm not a naval spokesperson. But what we do find that when the crews come back is that they found the deployments very rewarding professionally and personally from their experiences to be able to see not only other cultures, but honestly have a sense of pride in what they've trained and accomplished to do and why they've joined the Canadian Armed Forces. And of course, we're always open to learning best practices from other countries. While I didn't mention in my initial response, we're working with Japan, Philippines, the United States, Australia, New Zealand, South Korea. And so this gives us a wide variety of perspectives in the region. And so I think in the typical Canadian way, we're able to synthesize these various perspectives to be inclusive in other people's views that give us a much better sense of what's happening in the region.
Puis en voyant ce qui se passe dans le monde présentement, parce qu'on...
Seeing what's happening in the world today, there's a lot of change, there's a lot being said. Do you have any worries? Do you see things differently now in this case? That's given that there are some countries that are taking certain postures. Do you have any worries that have arisen recently given what's happening in the world? Thank you, Chair. There are a lot of things happening in the world these days. It's a more complicated and dangerous world. Take the Indo-Pacific. It was always a place with a lot going on. Take Taiwan, the South China Sea. And the situation remains. The United States is repositioning their way of doing things, how will that have a ripple effect in the Indo-Pacific region? Maybe that will leave more room for other countries to take up more space and have more clout. It's to be seen.
You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the answers. I'd like to talk a little bit about the seas, the disputed seas just beyond the Taiwan Strait. In particular, I know that the Government of Canada doesn't recognize the PRC's 9-dash line claim over the South China Sea. And I note as well that the Government of Canada does recognize the Philippines' sovereignty over rights and jurisdictions in its exclusive economic zone. So my first question is, does the Government of Canada consider the Scarborough Shoal as part of the Philippines' EEZ?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I'm not going to answer specifically on that because I don't know the answer myself, but I do know that what we have called, obviously, we are opposing the militarization of disputed features and the use of, frankly, we're seeing naval, Coast Guard, and maritime militia vessels to intimidate and threaten ships of other states. And what we have been calling is, in 2016, there was a UNCLOS Convention Law of the Seas arbitral decision tribunal ruling that brought forth by the Philippines, which is binding on all the parties, including China, and we're calling on all the parties to abide by that ruling.
Thank you. And if I recall correctly, I think that 2016 tribunal ruling concluded that there was a 12-mile nautical sea centered on the Scarborough Shoal, and Canada recognized and supported that ruling. The reason why I asked this question is that just several months ago, Minister McGuinty signed a treaty titled Status of Visiting Forces Agreement between Canada and the Philippines. The treaty provides for joint military exercises and operations between Canada's military and the Philippine military. So my first question is, will these joint exercises and operations include naval ones?
We expect the upcoming exercises and cooperative framework with the Philippines to include all elements, all domains of the Canadian Armed Forces.
Okay, the reason why I asked this question is because there's been a lot of kinetic conflict between elements of the Philippine state, naval vessels of the Philippine state and naval vessels of the PRC state in those disputed waters. Last summer, there was collisions between ships of the PRC and the Philippine Coast Guards. If we're going to be participating in joint exercises and operations, what measures are being put in place to ensure that there's not a kinetic conflict between a NATO member and the People's Republic of China?
For the question, I believe the process by which I described earlier about how we come up with the concept of operations at the maritime cooperation level, we run it through through a foreign policy risk assessment was the name that we use for the joint consultation process between Department of National Defence and Global Affairs Canada. That will really drive the measure or level of risk that we intend, and we also have to be very careful that we're not doing this in a provocative manner, because we are intending to have exercises, cooperation, respecting international law and UNCLOS. And so the first exercise that'll be coming up was exercise Balikatan later this summer. We're just waiting for the ratification of that status of visiting forces agreement through the Philippine parliament system. But all those considerations are taken into account, where we should go and where we should not go.
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions for this round.
You still have 32 seconds.
Well, I'll wait for the next round.
No
Thanks.
problem. Thank you very much. We go next to MP Oliphant. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, and I will be short, and I will turn to Mr. Lewis after one question. At Global Affairs right now, there's a big conversation about the nexus between development and trade. It's a constant conversation about how we advance our commercial and domestic interests with development. Do you see our work in the Indo-Pacific as a nexus between security and trade? Is there a part of it that is that? If not, that's also fine, but I'm just wondering if there's another nexus we should be talking about.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe I can start, and happy to have others join in. I think I would agree with the member that there is a security and trade nexus. As we highlighted at the beginning of this presentation, yes. For example, Royal Canadian Navy transits through the transit straits. It's oftentimes to move from point A, one operational area, to another, but it's also to demonstrate, under UNCLOS, the not freedom of navigation in the U.S. FONOPS kind of way, but the ability to work and operate in international straits. And maritime openness to maritime transit is key for trade. Those are the routes that are being used. The Taiwan Strait, I think, is 20% of global trade goes through there. But there's also the Strait of Malacca. There's also the South China Sea, and it's also areas where there are natural resources, fishing, etc. And those are all sort of trade related. So I would tend to agree with you that there is a trade security nexus to be had, particularly in the maritime domain.
We heard it here first.
Thank you for sharing your time. Thank you all for being here, for your service to our country. It strikes home because a good friend of mine, she has, the family has 2 children in the armed forces. One of who's been on ships on the West Coast and comes back, and I get stories anecdotally. But I'd like to ask you. You mentioned that Canada interacts with all sorts of allies, does joint exercises and lands in countries. What are our allies' perceptions of Canadian armed forces? I hear the stories anecdotally, but what are we hearing? What lessons can we learn from that? How do people perceive Canada armed forces?
Thank you, Chair, for the question. If you've heard the stories, they're probably closest to the source of what the sailors hear while they're in visiting ports. But what I hear is that through our Indo-Pacific strategy, that we have shown up and we've stayed. And that makes us a reliable partner within the Indo-Pacific region. And wherever we go, when I've traveled with the Chief of Defense Staff or with the Minister, there's always want more of Canada. And I think that speaks well to the competency, professionalism, and the way the Canadian Armed Forces presents themselves. So that's my understanding as the stories are relayed to me from allies.
Appreciate that, but some of the stories from the younger people might be a bit saltier language from fairness. You also mentioned having the importance of having a dialogue with adversaries as well. What's working? What can be improved? How can that dialogue make sure that stays? Because that's the first line of defense is diplomacy.
Chair, for the question, I think it's super important to be able to have that dialogue when the moment of crisis comes, where we're trying to diffuse tensions or make sure that we have a common understanding of what transpired. We need to revert to dialogue as the first course of action rather than escalation. And so they may be difficult conversations. We may feel uncomfortable, but at the end of it, we need to be able to represent the interests of our government and the people of our nations. And certainly my interactions with my PLA counterparts of, even though there's been strong messaging, it's always been done in a respectful and courteous manner, notwithstanding the depth and gravity. And so I think that goes a long way to, I wouldn't necessarily call it trust at this point, but a mutual respect that we're representing the positions of our government and we're doing so in a professional manner.
Grateful Nation, I want to thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Next, we go to MP Duceppe. 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I consulted with many experts from the region, many people who represent threatened populations, but that no, the internal machinations of the Chinese Communist Party and internal power games. I'd like to come back to that, and it's linked to the study today. Everyone tells me that it's directly linked with the issue of Taiwan because those who were purged were more conservative regarding the military annexation of Taiwan. And maybe President Xi wanted to get rid of them in order to militarily annex Taiwan, regardless of the form that would take. You mentioned Japan, another ally in the Indo-Pacific. There was a pretty strong statement from Japan's president regarding a potential intervention of China in Taiwan. In your various departments, if we're worried and we're talking about it and aware, you must certainly be aware of that. Even more than us. I imagine there are different scenarios on the table if ever there were to be a Chinese military operation in Taiwan. Could you tell the committee, obviously not the detailed scenarios, but tell us, one, if there are those scenarios, and two, if Canada would react in the same way as the Japanese Prime Minister said she would react? Thank you, Chair, for the question. Excellent question. We always examine every contingency that could arise, and without saying what the Canadian reaction would be, I can't speak to that at this time. Okay. On the other, I understand that you can't go into detail, but I can imagine you're aware of everything that's happening at the moment. At the end of the day, wouldn't it be good to send a solid message from the Canadian government? I understand that it's not a free trade agreement, but the agreement that was struck at the end of April between Taiwan and Canada, wouldn't it be a good message to send, especially since it planned investments in sectors like AI, clean energy, ethical supply chains? Wouldn't that be a message of solidarity with Taiwan and also ensure that our links won't break because we're afraid of making Beijing mad?
Thanks for the question, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much more I can say on that beside the fact that I know discussions are underway. I think that trade, with Taiwan is an area that historically, there's no reason why we can't trade with Taiwan. It's been the core of our relationship. We have a CTO, a Canadian Trade Office in Taipei. Taiwan has their TICO office, the Taipei Economic and Cooperation Office here too. It's fundamental to our relationship. So that's why we were engaged in those discussions. We have an annual consultation group called CTEC with Taiwan, where we talk about trade issues and cooperation related cooperation. As I mentioned, I know discussions are underway in terms of next steps for that arrangement.
Thank you very much. Next, we have MP Michael Chong. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to go back to the Taiwan Strait. As we were talking about earlier, that the Canadian Navy has transited down the median line of the strait in international waters. I'd like to talk about the airspace above the strait, as been referenced earlier in this committee. We are seeing increased frequency and number of flights by the PLA into Taiwan's air defense identification zone. And they seem to be increasing in tempo and in scale. How concerned should Canadians be about that turning into a kinetic conflict?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. Yes, I would agree with your assessment that we've seen sort of an increasing tempo of Chinese air and maritime activity in and around Taiwan, a number of exercises. And as I've mentioned earlier in this testimony, we are obviously very concerned about that. about the risk of escalation, a risk of an actual conflict, or even the risk of an incident spiraling and sort of arriving at unfathomable consequences. So in those instances, we continue to call on those to resume with the status quo, to be peaceful, to de-escalate. That is our approach.
Mr. Chair, not that I'm condoning those actions, but in international law, the air defense identification zone doesn't represent an illegal act or an act of war. It's the 12 nautical miles, which is the firm line. And so the air defense identification zone is there to alert other nations that when they enter there, they're most likely going to be positively identified. I just want to make that clear, sir.
Yeah, understood. I appreciate that clarification. And speaking of the 12-mile nautical zone and the actual sovereign territory of nation states, how do we as Western powers differentiate between PLA exercises above the Taiwan Strait and in the air defense identification zone and the beginning of an actual invasion or conflict?
From a military perspective, what we're seeing could be construed as rehearsals to be able to conduct those activities, which are concerning. It's our position from a military point of view is that this needs to be solved through other means rather than through military confrontation. It has the possibility to disrupt the security and stability in the region.
The reason why I ask this question is, all of us around the table read almost weekly and certainly monthly about these PLA operations in the air defense identification zone, and we have been now for years. At what point should we become concerned about it? It's happening at such a frequency that it almost seems like a weather update when another news article pops up about Taiwan's air defense identification zone. So at what point should our constituents, Canadians, be concerned about this and not treat it as just a regular occurrence that's been taking place now for many, many years?
Thanks, Mr. President, Mr. Chair, for the question. As the member points out, yes, there has been sort of an increase in tempo, and I think some people could argue that the status quo has kind of changed as a result of that because it normalizes kind of Chinese activity, air activity around Taiwan, and I would say. As a result of that, kind of the indicators and warnings becomes a lot harder to track and sort of the shorter time frames. But there are other indicators and warnings that are also looked at, including sort of things that are happening in mainland China, for example, that would be looked at to sort of as a more determinative factor to an actual activity.
President Xi Jinping has established the goal of achieving the great reunification of the Chinese nation by the centenary of the establishment of the People's Republic of China in 2049. As part of that goal, he has established military goals in the shorter term, particularly a 2027 military goal and a 2035 military goal. How should we interpret China's goal of national rejuvenation, particularly with respect to the 2027 goal and the 2035 goal, in the context of Taiwan?
As I mentioned earlier, the People's Republic of China and their development of military capabilities across the entire spectrum lead us to believe that they're developing capability that would be close to achieving that goal. And there's obviously more reporting at levels above what we can talk about here, sir. But there's an incredible buildup of military capability that it would be counterproductive for international peace and security in the region.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I have no further questions.
Thank you very much. I understand that Mr. Ziad Abul Taif would also like a final round of questions, a final opportunity for questions. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for generous time. Canadians are watching us, and I think that some of the obvious questions about how do we go about those trips or those missions in Taiwan Strait. We know that the Chinese, they do their drills. They show us that's an example that at one time they may want to invade the island, and that could be a trigger for a bigger war. So how do we go about Canadian mission? Do we do it alone? Do we do it in conjunction with our G7? I think it would be nice to explain that to Canadians since they're watching.
I'll just go into very quickly the breakdown of transits that we've done with the nations that we've done them with. We've done 13 transits since 2018, 7 transits since the introduction of the Indo-Pacific Strategy in 2022. Of those 13 transits, 6 of them have been by ourselves, 7 have been with bilateral partners. 6 of those bilateral transits have been with the United States, and sometimes on one operation it's go north and go south because of the training activities. And the last one that we conducted was with Australia. And so I'm prepared to provide the exact breakdown after, so we don't take more time here in committee. But all those are coordinated through the joint objectives for training for those exercise areas north and south. Other countries that conduct transits are the United States, Australia, New Zealand, United Kingdom, France, Germany, Japan, Turkey, and Netherlands. And so we're not the only Indo-Pacific nor Euro-Atlantic country that are conducting those transits.
An escalation could be an option. That's the way things are. Do we have a capacity constraints as far as Canada?
I'm not sure what you mean by escalation as an option. Certainly the Government of Canada and the Department of Defense would not look to escalate our activities. The Canadian Forces do have finite resources to meet all our commitments through defense of the homeland as our first priority with our own Arctic, the binational command through NORAD for maritime warning, aerospace warning control. And we've got our operations with Operation Reassurance in Latvia in that environment. And then also equally important is our Indo-Pacific. And so at this time, there's finite resources for us to be everywhere.
Can we say that our mission in the Strait is a reminder to China about our historical position when it comes to this dynamic of the region?
I'm not sure how to answer. A reminder of our historical position? No, I mean, I think what's most important when we're dealing with the PRC is and what they want to see, and I think what we're happy to provide is a reaffirmation of our one China policy. And then to be able to have those channels of communication and be able to explain them what it means and why we believe that these transits are in accordance with our position, and that we aren't changing our position. Our one China policy hasn't changed. We're not escalating, as we talked about. So, in a sense, I guess what you're getting at is it's kind of the same thing. Yeah, it's a reaffirmation of our one China policy.
G7 asking for peace and stability in the region. That's an obvious position because, as I said earlier, maybe the last thing anybody wants is a major war around this issue. How do you see China responding to that?
So, Mr. Chair, thanks for the question. How they respond to it is, is how we've talked about already. I mean, a démarche. I mean, every time a transit happens or a statement is released, whether that be G7 or whether that be an individual country, they raise it as an issue. Just like us, reaffirming our position, they will reaffirm their position and put it on the table. So that's how they respond to it.
This question is not more of a generic question. Where does the international law sit in this whole dynamic between China trying to reaffirm its position as far as Taiwan or its policy? Same on our side, we do try to reaffirm our position or remind China that this is our position. How do you see the international law at play here?
Thank you, Mr. President. Maybe I could take that one. I mean, unless it goes to an actual tribunal and a court case, international law is kind of depending a little bit on what was meant the eye of the beholder in some instances. And in this case, you know, a vast majority of countries believe that the Taiwan Strait is one of international strait under UNCLOS. China recognizes that it is. It actually talks that it is an international strait, but it sort of opposes having you know, foreign military transits without asking for, you know, at least notification, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you know, it is in a way how China interprets their position over the strait.
Is it up to the, how much time?
Well, we're over
I'm done?
We're over the time, unfortunately.
Well, thank
yes.
you anyway.
We'll have a brief
Thank you.
intervention from Monsieur Duceppe.
Juste une petite question, ça vient.
Just a little question that just popped into my head. Recently, there were 2 Liberal MPs that were in Taiwan, and they were called back quickly and weren't able to complete their visit in Taiwan. They were called back by, we don't know who it came from, the call. Do you think
It's relevant to the
On a parlé d'environnement, de COP, de...
we talked about COP15, we talked about the environment. I think we can talk about this.
des relations Chine,
But I'm
Taiwan.
talking about China-Taiwan relationships. I want to know if, in your opinion, that MPs are affected by the new relationship that the government seems to have with the current Chinese regime.
Mr. Chair, thanks for the question. You know, I think in terms of, you know, what I mentioned, our position on Taiwan and our unofficial engagement with Taiwan, you know, in line with the independence of Parliament, you know, MPs have been traveling to Taiwan for a very long time, and so, you know, I imagine that would continue.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That concludes our questioning. Thank you very much to the officials for your appearance before the committee, and thank you for your testimony today.